Here with us now is Paul Reichhoff, founder and CEO of Independent Veterans of America and host of the Independent Americans podcast. Paul, always great to see you. We saw Kelly in Bucks County. That's where the vice president is. She is flanked by 100 Republicans. I'm going to say the names again. Congressman Adam Kinzinger. There they are on your screen. Former Georgia Lieutenant Governor Jeff Duncan. Former New Jersey Governor Christine Todd Whitman. We know Harris is trying to make the argument that she's not too liberal. Do you think this strategy is going to be effective in the next hour or so?
I do. I don't know how many Republicans she's going to move, but I think it will move independents, especially folks who've been tracking on the news, who are higher information voters, who even know who Adam Kinzinger is. Yeah. And I think there's another wave that's been extremely influential, which are some of the retired generals. General Stanley McChrystal recently came out and endorsed her. General Mark Milley continues to unleash some scary comments about Trump. That's right. And I do think over time that moves people. I mean, as Pennsylvania is an independent place, there's a higher number of independents voting, and they're actually the majority there in this election. And I think that's really who they're fighting for here and in other battleground states like Wisconsin and Georgia. They're going for that moderate middle, and they're both trying to show they're more moderate. She, frankly, is doing a much better job of it lately than he is, but that's where the fight is, right in the middle.
You and I talk about polls a lot. We both say it's a snapshot of the current time. A new Gallup poll for our viewers. It shows Democrats losing ground with independents, with more saying they lean Republican. Harris seems to be getting out of her comfort zone. She will be talking to Fox News in a few hours. She even might go on Joe Rogan's podcast. What do you think of that strategy for independent voters?
I think it's smart. I think she would be smart to go on to places like Joe Rogan. She went yesterday on Charlemagne the God. She's trying to go outside the conventional media, and she's trying to reach men. I mean, this is really where she's struggled consistently, and she's got to go to places like that. She's got to be in sports. She's got to be in culture. She's got to get outside of the media ecosphere, and she's got to rebrand herself. And that's most effective with people who don't really know her, which are still some people in this country who haven't been tracking on her, don't view her as liberal. But baked into it is also a Democrat Party problem. The party is still viewed as very liberal, and then they've got plenty of other headaches like Eric Adams here in New York that continue to tarnish the brand. So I think she's dealing with a couple problems, but one of them is the Democratic brand that really struggles in red states where they can't even compete, and it continues to struggle in some of the swing states.
Speaking of those red states, I want to ask you about some of the language that former President Trump has been using. He talked about using the military against his political opponents. He described them as enemies within. I want to play a snippet for our viewers.
It is the enemy from within, and they're very dangerous. We have China, we have Russia, we have all these countries. If you have a smart president, they can all be handled. The more difficult are, the Pelosi's, these people, they're so sick, and they're so evil.
This is dangerous rhetoric, especially after what we saw happen January 6th. He said his opponents are more dangerous than Russia or China. How do you think voters at home are going to take this kind of rhetoric, this kind of language?
I don't think they're going to take it well. It's radical, it's dangerous, it's extreme, it's authoritarian. And I think in a country that prides itself on independence, when you hear about a political candidate potentially locking people up for their political views, I think it's going to drive people away. I think he continues to double down on this support for basically the insurrection and an insurgency that's happening around the country. And I think that's an area where he continues to drive away independent voters. Many of them are veterans. They care about our national security. They saw what happened on January 6th, and you can't rewrite that. And our enemies are celebrating. When they see a former commander-in-chief talking about using the military on our own people, that has Putin doing backflips. I mean, this is exactly what they want to see. And the enemy from within is there, but it's the people who stormed the Capitol on January 6th. It's the people who want to overthrow the government violently, and it's some of the people in his own party.
The former president is still downplaying what happened on January 6th. Here's what he had to say about that during a live interview.
Those people that did go down, which was a tiny fraction of the people that went to Washington. I don't know what you had, 500, 600, 700 people go down to the Capitol. But those people, that was not one of those people had a gun. Nobody was killed except for Ashley Babbitt. She was killed.
We've had many Republicans on the show, on this network, say it is time to move on. Even J.D. Vance has been asked about this repeatedly. He does not say that the insurrection happened. Your thoughts, even now, 4 years later, with the former president denying what happened on January 6th, or downplaying it? I shouldn't say denying.
Well, first of all, it's a failure to acknowledge a real national security threat, right? Something that happened, something that we all saw on television and we know is real and is still a threat. The domestic extremism is still a threat to our national security. The Pentagon says that, not the Democrats. And now more and more Republicans are tone it down. Yesterday, Karl Rove said it's also a bad political strategy. So it continues to drive people out of the Republican Party. It continues to drive independents away from him in droves. And I think that's why Republicans Republicans are struggling in other places, too, like Deb Fischer, for example, in Nebraska. She's running against an independent named Dan Osborne. There's no Democrat in the race. So when people have an option that's other than Republican, that's not a Democrat, independents can do very well, and I think Nebraska is a good example.
Do you think this is going to affect those down-ballot races?
I do, in places like that, yes.
Yeah,
I mean,
sure.
unfortunately, in a lot of places, you've got gerrymandered districts and you've got incumbents that are pretty protected. But I think in the states where Republicans have tended to be strong, places like Nebraska recently, right, they're going to lose ground, especially when there is a stronger veteran alternative. Deb Fischer is a civilian. She's never served in uniform. She's basically a professional politician. She's running as a populist in Dan Osborne, who is a machinist and a mechanic and was in the Navy. When you have a choice like that, independents and Republicans are going to choose the alternative because they want to see change, but they don't want to see a radical overthrow of the government.
Let's move on to Harris. Like we mentioned, she's speaking near the site where George Washington crossed the Delaware, according to the Atlantic magazine's new cover story. And I want to show that because this was a great read. Trump and his authoritarian political movement represent an existential threat to every ideal that Washington cherished and encouraged in his new nation. Do you think this is overstating what is going on right now?
No. Not when he denies the results of the election. He apologizes for the people who tried to storm the Capitol. And his entire ecosystem continues to push this lie that the election was stolen and that there wasn't really an insurrection. This is also backed up by his cozying up with Putin and his favor with people like Viktor Orban, authoritarians and radicals, who I think are real threats to our national security, threats to our allies. And so at the end of the day, he's got to make the case that he can make America stronger and safer. And when he looks unstable, he looks radical, and he looks friendly with our enemies, he's not making that case. He's trying to look more moderate, but he's not doing it. And Kamala Harris is trying, and it looks like she's making a little more progress than he is.
Well, Harris was asked about the stakes of the election in a radio town hall yesterday. We're going to play a very brief clip, I believe.
You have two choices, or you don't vote, but you have two choices if you do. And it's two very different visions for our nation. One mind that is about taking us forward and progress and investing in the American people, investing in their ambitions, dealing with their challenges. And the other, Donald Trump, is about taking us backward.
The other is about fascism. Why can't we just say it?
Yes, we can say that.
Yeah.
This interview making a lot of headlines today. A moment ago, you mentioned the former Joint Chiefs Chairman, General Mark Milley. He's also called Trump fascist to the core. Do you think that's fair?
Yes. I mean, I trust the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, he was the single, authority of our entire military during some pretty trying times and served President Trump. I believe him if he says it. I mean, this is not a guy who's running for office. This is a lifelong public servant who knows about tyrants. He knows how to protect America, and he's putting his country first. If he's saying it, I think we should believe it. If Kamala Harris was smart, his statements and his rhetoric from General Milley would be the lead argument to the entire country. Because at the end of the day, most Americans don't like either one of them. We've been talking about this for a while, and they have to pick the lesser of two evils. And if she can say, he's absolutely crazy, he's unstable, and he likes our enemies, and you may not like me, but I'm better than him, she will win independent voters. And that's going to be the key in swing states and maybe to the entire election.
Paul Reichhoff, I always appreciate our conversations. Thank you so much for coming on.
Back at you. Thank you.